Hi, everybody. Devin Stone here. I remember I had a friend come over from out of town, and he is a bit younger than me. And he said, "Hey, man, you grew up in the 80s. What was that like?" And I realized, the 80s it's this iconic decade. And while some of that I think might just be nostalgia for those of us who lived through it, right? So we see nostalgia everywhere, nostalgia in popular culture. That's why they make movies about Transformers and G.I. Joe, and now the Cobra Kai series based on the Karate Kid, and in part the Star Wars. Although Star Wars the original Episode 4 was made in '77, and then Empire in 1980, and then we had Return of the Jedi. They were extremely popular in the '80s, throughout the '80s. And so some of that might just be my generation's nostalgia, just like when my mom gets all nostalgic and watery-eyed about, Dick Van Dyke and Cary Grant and Clark Gable and whoever, whoever their stars were when they grew up. I'm sure that's a part of it. But we also have to keep in mind that the 80s, I realize the 80s is the last decade prior to the internet. Please don't talk to me about, DARPA and all the government stuff that was going on. I mean, popular release of the internet, you're looking at the earliest 1994, 1995-ish is when it started to really start to take off. And then you had AOL, and they're spamming you in your inbox, or email inbox, your first email inbox. You've got mail. I remember all that shit, right? No, your junk mail and your mailbox is full of those AOL CD-ROMs, and there were all kinds of jokes, people using them as frisbees and coasters, because they were very aggressive with the marketing of these things, and rightfully so. But see, people like you and I, because if we remember the 80s, we just think, well, that wasn't particularly a long time ago, like the 50s, the 60s, maybe even the 70s. That's old stuff, right? But the 80s, still fairly recent and somewhat modern. I don't think that future generations are going to see things that way. I think future generations will see everything from the 80s prior as being in the industrial age, and everything from the 90s onward will be in the information age. The term the information age was coined long before it ever really took place. I remember we used to think, oh, we're in the information age in the 80s when my dad brought home our first, Tandy. I think it was a Tandy 1500 from Radio Shack. And it ran MS-DOS. It had no hard drive, so you had to have basically the BIOS, the motherboard BIOS, would just boot the drives in order. You had to have this floppy 5-inch MS-DOS floppy in the A drive so that the BIOS would look there for the operating system, boot the operating system. Then it would boot up, and you'd have to remove it, then put in Word, then install Word every time, run the commands. We'd have the commands written on the little envelope sleeves that the floppies were in, so we knew what to type. It was awful. And we fancied ourselves living in the information age because we had computers, even though they were these dumb terminals that were not attached to any internet. Like, they were jokes. They're glorified calculators. Sure, they were highly useful for certain things, for calculations and for design and various things, but they were nowhere near the potential that they are today. I remember, they had Photoshop prior to the internet. That's how old some of these applications are, Adobe Photoshop and Illustrator. It's kind of nice that they've stood the test of time. But we had Photoshop, and there's no internet. So you had to buy these booklets of these giant binders full of photography and clip art in floppy disks or CD-ROMs, and you'd look up in a book what number the fucking clip art or the photo was in, so you could have something to use for your comp you were going to make, or scene you were looking to put together in Photoshop, just so it could be digital. I mean, it was immensely primitive compared to today. And then, of course, communication. Now there's no Toys R Us, but if you wanted a toy, you learned about it by watching a TV commercial, and then You had to look it up in the phone book, what the address was. I remember my dad calling them on the phone, asking them how to get there. You'd have to get directions, no GPS. And like all technology, it's a double-edged sword. It has the power to really help our lives, make things more convenient, more efficient, easier. And it also has the potential to destroy us, destroy certain aspects of our culture and our lives. And it does both. It does both. It's good and bad at the same time. I remember things being slower and calmer and more peaceful. And even though the household I grew up in was extremely chaotic and extremely toxic, there was kind of a sweetness of that time when you couldn't overstimulate in all these areas. I'm not advocating going back or living like an Amish person or wiring up a VHS cassette recorder and only living off those for sake of trying to recapture something. But I do remember things not being as fast-paced. And then I realized I really am in the last generation alive that will remember what the world was like prior to the internet. On the positive side, I can reach all of you using YouTube and podcasts and all these wonderful things. But then again, on the downside, at least with the mobile phone era, it has completely destroyed men and women's ability to interact properly, to interact naturally. I can't say that's a fair trade-off. I mean, yeah, I can stream all the movies I want, but the bigger crisis, the downside is we may reach a complete negative population growth, like birth rates might completely collapse as men and women become completely unable to communicate. So if progressivism is the hallmark for progress, I hate to see what regressivism looks like. Look at what we're looking at right now. So one of the mistakes that you could make, let's say you're going to be a pickup artist, okay? You're going to go to a bar or club and do the standard shit, is that you think that these places are for socializing because that's what they historically were for. People used to socialize. Like, hey, let's meet someone I didn't know before. But that's not what they're there for at all. They're there for women to puff their own sense of SMV, try to get free stuff, and for men to sex beg. You might say, well, that's kind of always the way it was. Like, yeah, but when human interactions were limited to these social circles, then your odds of meeting someone, a hookup or a quality person, were infinitely greater than they are now. I remember I was at my mother's house once, and she showed me her high school yearbook from 1966. It was full of black and white photos. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing because it was like peering into another universe, another dimension, when the people looked completely different. Now, not just their style, but there were these photos of the quad, the area between all the classrooms, and there are all these kids walking around. And every single one had a beaming, glowing, ear-to-ear smile on their face. Every single student had their head up high, no weird posture issues. They all had perfect posture, and every single one of them were beanpole thin. Every single one thin. There wasn't one obese person in the entire photograph. And there were like a couple hundred students in that one photograph. It was this panoramic shot. It was from way back far, and I couldn't believe it. It was absolutely amazing how rare obesity really was, where just everybody's just naturally fit and everybody is happy. Everybody is smiling. Everybody is happy. And of course, there was all kinds of political bullshit and war and nonsense going on. But that's what happens when people are normally socialized, when people rely on their interpersonal communication and their interpersonal skills first. You have to thrive in that environment, even if you're a bit of an outcast, because, hey, I'm the biggest opponent to the government education system on planet Earth by far. It's a horrible, horrendous institution, and it needs to be dismantled completely. It needs to be smashed to bits. But even if you were a bit of an outcast in the system, you could still find friends and socialize. You know, I started this discussion talking about all of these throwback series that are so nostalgic about the 80s, like the Cobra Kai series, which it is enjoyable. It is always fun. I always get a kick out of seeing these characters revived and revitalized, but there are no new ideas. None. All Hollywood can do is just recycle old ideas, comic book characters that existed before, and play off this nostalgia. Star Wars, as we know, is just dead because all they can do is do fan service in Star Wars, and that's it. And ruin it with a bunch of fempowerment, Mary Sue bullshit, garbage. But as we become more decadent, that means we're so safe and doing so well that we just want to be protected. The appeal to be insulated from anything that might offend us, and I point the finger most accusingly at the social justice crowd, of course, because they're the most despicable group of human beings ever to walk the earth. And mark my words, future generations will not think kindly of you if you're in that crowd. They will be just reviled. But now everybody's afraid to offend them, so all we can do is do bad rehashings of old ideas. In the original Karate Kid, they had those scenes where everybody's at the beach and socializing. Yeah, because that's what you did. People socialized. There was no other outlet to get to know people, to get dates, to talk to people. And because those interactions are limited to who you knew in your social circles, women's ability to be hypergamous was also limited. And that was very, very healthy for civilization, right? Well, not just healthy, it's natural. Natural human emotions and human connections, interactions limited to your human interpersonal circles are what are natural. What happens when you distort that? What happens when every woman has access to an unlimited supply of male attention, as I have discussed over and over again, but I think it really bears repeating because things really have changed. You can't just sweep the evidence under the rug. You can't sweep the evidence under the rug when the evidence is irrefutable that there are more single people north of 30, north of 40, north of 50 than at any time in our history. There are more men, young men, age 18 to 30, that are going without regular sexual contact than ever before in our history. There are more divorces than ever before in our history. There are fewer people willing and wanting to get married than at any time in our history. You have to ask yourself why that is. What has happened? The introduction of the mobile device has produced an immense distortion in the way human beings interact and communicate. And it's been a net negative, an outrageously net negative. Potentially to the demise of our entire civilization. That is underway. It is no more a conspiracy theory or a doomsday theory or some pet, catastrophic or catastrophist sex fantasy that I have. It is happening right now. The truth is in front of your eyes. When men and women can't relate, when families can't be formed, what happens? Exactly what I think the social controllers have meant to happen, which is that everybody is this narcissist, whether covert or overt. Everybody lives alone in their own little silos. There's been this drastic movement for the last 40 years to usher women into the workforce by pressuring them. If you want to do it, fine. I'm not one of these people that says, take women's rights away, but you have to look at the evidence and what's happened. And this massive push to tell women, you're like men, you can do these things. Oh, go, your corporate God awaits. Go make something of yourself. Go sit in the cubicle farm. And women are realizing, I hope, that's really the fulfillment in that life is really not there. Because they all, whether they admit it or not, they all hope to meet a guy to get pregnant and get married so they can drop out of it. So all this nonsense of like the pay gap is a faulty conclusion. It's faulty. The difference in male and female pay is not dollars for hours for identical jobs. It is in lifetime earning potential, and that's largely because, one, men and women choose different careers, and two, women spend large portions of their lives not working, and that's always a negotiation between themselves and their husbands and every woman I have known in this situation or have worked with. So fuck you, stupid feminazis. But anyway, what has been the grand reward for all of this fempowerment? Women who are undateable, women whose own sense of their own self-worth, because of all this digitized attention seeking, makes them almost impossible to talk to because they're so arrogant and full of themselves, and their own narcissistic, solipsistic supply has been blown completely out of the water. Badgering you with their opinions, their own sense of nitpickiness goes through the roof because they feel like, well, I'm just a couple swipes away on a phone from another guy. Bad news. And MGTOW is the reaction to that. All of these laws and family court destroying these guys' lives. No fault divorce. I'm not saying that if you really want out of a marriage that either party shouldn't let them out of it. But with no fault divorce, then it doesn't matter. She can cheat on the guy and go, okay, court, gavel down. She takes your house, alimony for life. It doesn't matter. At least if it's her fault, if the judge says, well, there's evidence here that you committed adultery, you can leave, but you don't fucking get anything. Absolutely necessary. Because anything other than that, we're subsidizing divorce. None of you goddamn piece of shit leftists ever stop to think that with all your protectionism and all your crap. You never stop to think that might actually and does influence a woman's decision. Sometimes even the most evil of women, and you're out there, use that as the basis to get into the marriage with a guy in the first place. Like literally, oh, well, I'm going to marry him and then I'll get divorced and I'll be retired. Like that's really fucked up, but of course that happens. Of course there are women like that in the world. So one, women want to have their cake and eat it too. They want to be the ball-busting CEO and be in STEM fields and fempowerment, girl power, women can do it. But then when it comes to divorce, they instantly want to become these fawning little helpless sheep that need a white knighting judge bastard to slam his gavel down and force her former husband into a lifetime of indentured servitude. And we allow this. We allow this in our culture. We're afraid. The men out there, I'm speaking to you. You're afraid to speak truth to power to this because you're terrified that it will have a target painted on your head. And we sit back and we allow this to continue. And just like any regulation intended to protect someone, it has a chilling effect on the behavior itself. Men are going, I'm not fucking getting married. The writing is on the wall. It's coming out. Women who may very well be high quality women are saying, man, I can't find a guy who's willing to marry me. These guys do not want to get married. Well, fucking blame yourself. Fucking blame yourself and the system that you helped create. So what's this beautiful, brave new world that we're entering into? It is the Matrix. We didn't even notice it happening until it was already sprung on us, where our digital lives, our social media lives become the gold standard for human interaction. Everything that we do is compared to that. Your own life is unreal, but the Instagram and the Snapchat and the Facebook and the Twitter is real. That's your real persona, your real life, and everything outside of that is somehow fake. And that caters to, especially with women, but also with men who are a little bit socially awkward and shy. Instead of overcoming that shyness, It allows all of us to hide behind this aura of safety. So now, as I said earlier, a man approaching a woman at a bar is not this welcome, oh, but that's what I used to think, right? Yeah, but I'm this great guy and I do well and I'm reasonably good looking and I make a good salary and have a good career and I'm a real guy right in your face. Wouldn't you want to talk to me? But that is not the way that women are interpreting it. They're going, oh God, now I have to deal with him, because it's seen as safer for her to conduct those interactions from behind a screen. It's so much easier. You can reject people more easily. You can ghost them. You don't have to let them down. You don't have to deal with anyone who might be disappointed or read their emotions. So we're becoming completely emotionally disconnected from the rest of the human race. Is that good or bad? Do the fucking math. Of course it's bad. It's a fucking travesty. So I remember when the internet was growing, booming by leaps and bounds. And there was so much overinvestment and malinvestment and bullshit startup companies. I mean, that bubble popped and there had to be an adjustment period. But Bill Clinton and Al Gore wasted no time taking credit for all of that bubble. Good old Billy Boy. He was up there with his red nose and his red cheeks. I think it's great. Children, I got to get all these public schools on the internet. That was the false promise of it, you see. The promise of it was, and Al Gore claimed to have invented it or some shit like that. Stupid asshole. I mean, statists have no shame. Politicians have no shame. They're the ultimate opportunists. But I digress. All the academics, the idiot thinkers, college professors, politicians thought that the internet was going to bring about world peace. Can you believe that? I'm being serious. They did. They thought, oh, well, people, it's going to break down boundaries between people and between cultures. It's going to rescue the socially isolated. You'll be able to make friends. It will bring the human race together. That's actually what they thought when air travel became mainstream. They thought this is like, it's incredible technology. I mean, it's going to become a smaller world and cultures are going to have the harmonious blending together. We're all going to get along. People just can't help but go down this fucking utopian road, which is a lie. And thank God for that. Thank God it's a lie. I mean, it's a nonsense. But anyway, it's hard to say it with a straight face. They thought that the internet was all good. There was no downside to it. And before the social media era really became a thing and the smartphone era became a thing, so you're looking at 2008-ish, but really that didn't really take off to any degree of intersexual damaging state until around 2010. That's when it really started to become an issue. And now it's fast forward about 10 years, 2019, 2020, and it is fucked that fast, right? See, there's nothing else that could have possibly done this other than this rapid ascension in technology and what it's done to the natural order, okay? There was kind of a sweet spot for a little bit in the early ages of the internet because you didn't have social media really. So if you want to meet someone, people were kind of on there, but the intention was to meet someone in real life. So I remember like AOL Instant Messenger, a bunch of you probably have happy memories of that. But here's the thing. I have happy memories of it. I don't have angry memories like I do of my Twitter and Instagram and all these fucking chicks at my Facebook. That gives me angry memories. I have fond memories of AIM because with AIM, those were your friends, people you already knew, and they were on there to actually talk. It's really funny how Facebook, you get an IM on Facebook and it's like an annoyance. Why did that happen? When did that happen? Well, it's because of the nature of the medium itself. The nature of the medium is intended to be a socially distancing mechanism where you just engage in trying to dramatize and glamorize your life from afar and make general posts to everybody without ever having intimate contact with people. That's the whole point. It should be called antisocial not working, It's the most dehumanizing travesty of a social invention that we've ever seen. But that wasn't the way it was. I remember there was a sweet spot with dating apps because if you were just interested in someone, you had to be on a dating app. So the men were paying for it, the women were paying for it, and I remember getting laid a lot off those things. It was kind of nice. It was like, well, that's for dating. You got dates. It was really easy. There were decent girls on there. But now it's entirely different. See, there's no point in having a date, being on a dating site, or even if you are, the entire landscape, the sexual market landscape is completely different because of the mobile social era that allows us to be plugged in 24/7, and we are plugged in 24/7. It has that addictive component in it, and it has the component of women being able to choose from a near infinite pool of guys, which one is going to give them a false impression of their own SMV. That's been proven that women tend to overestimate their own SMV. But we men, that's female nature. Female nature is to seek as much attention as possible and try to pick from the best guys, even though she will be less and less likely to do that because, you know, like Rollo Tomasi said, that she always has this beta male dread. She's going to have this dread that there could be just a little bit higher SMV guy right around the corner. Well, what enables that? The infinite dimension of the social media space enables that. So it's pretty much wrecked. And then men, our nature is to give the attention to women. So there you go. It's that devil's dance. It's like, you know, you look at any of these Instagram posts and women are sure to have at least 5 ready, steady beta orbiters, even if they're digital, say, wow, you're so beautiful. Wow, you're so gorgeous. So beautiful, so beautiful, so gorgeous. Men will do that even if there's a 1 in 1 quadrillionth chance that she will sleep with them. It's like, you know, Pavlov or what, you know, you have an experiment where a rat pulls a lever and it's variable reinforcement. He never knows when he's going to get a treat. He will crank on that thing like a slot machine. This issue is not one cause. It isn't one cause. It's a multitude of factors that's causing this, because at the same time you have this feminism, you have the feminine primary social order. Rollo Tomasi really laid that one to rest, right? And this fempowerment narrative coupled with female solipsism, this narcissistic worldview that women have, where even women who are old and way past their expiration date are not willing to lower their standards. And you see this everywhere. You see this on dating sites, eHarmony, Match.com, Plenty of Fish. You'll see these women past their 50s, past their 60s, and they'll say, you know, that they will literally, and I've known women like this. I've met them. I've befriended them. And they'll say things like, I want a guy who's successful, who has a brain in his head, and who's good looking. And no, I'm not as hot as I was when I was 20, but that shouldn't matter. And they will use the standards of men. They'll use men's standards. They'll say like, well, maybe I was a 7 out of 10 before, but now I'm a 9 out of 10 because I've got money. It's like, that doesn't fucking matter, lady. That's a standard for a man, not for a woman. But do you see how the gender equalism kind of warps people's brains, that these women want to be able to use equalism, and they've internalized that equalism to the level of a paradigm, a belief system, where now they convince themselves that it shouldn't matter even though they're not attractive to men. And they have also convinced themselves that when men like, they shouldn't have to pay attention to, because men are pieces of shit anyway. And I see this like these old prunes that go, no hookups. It's like, lady, you know, really give it up to a few guys, because maybe you'll bamboozle one into a relationship. I mean, by now you should really know what men like. Not that you have to sleep with every man, but come on. And that you think you can put a guy through the rigmarole of dating him for a month before you put out, you know? They literally want to convince us that their SMV has not declined. And they are so wrapped up in their own heads and the bullshit fempowerment narrative, beauty's what's on the inside, And they, of course, have this disdain and hate the male imperative and have no compassion for it, right? Because men and women aren't allowed to be different. They're supposed to be the same. So she's supposed to be able to take the standards you would set for an older man, like an older man who is successful, and go, well, I'm a perfect 10 now because I'm more successful. I have more money and I'm more independent than I was back then. So, yeah. And men go, oh, God, well, that's just revolting. I mean, now you're saying you don't need a man and you're going to try to wear the pants. And women chalk that up to men being insecure and intimidated. Oh, these pussy boys are intimidated by me because I'm independent. I'm powerful. You know, guys, like, start telling truth to power, which the MGTOW guys, God bless them, are telling them, no, we're not intimidated. We just find you revolting. You're revolting. Your attitude is revolting. It doesn't fucking matter that you make all this money. You act like a man. You look like a man, and you will never date me. MGTOW is the natural reaction to a world, to this digitized world that has grown and is growing increasingly hostile to men. The APA publishes a Nazi junk science paper, like saying traditional masculinity is bad. Oh, because you don't do as well in school. Like, well, when did government education become the gold standard for human interactions and the way males should act? It's a sure sign of decadence when the very qualities that men have that made conquering the planet, making it comfortable and safe for most people, and wealthy and prosperous for most people, including women, are now rendered as obsolete, determined to be obsolete. You should be concerned, and I'm for the movement. I'm for the MGTOW movement. I consider, at least in this phase of my life, to be a MGTOW. I'm not going to make any ideology promises for the rest of my life, but yeah, right now, MGTOW for sure. But you should be concerned because it was just a couple decades ago where it would be unheard of. Like, no, that's the best thing in life. The best thing in life would be to meet a sweetheart, to enjoy romance, to fall in love, to start a family and live your culture, your life, and connect. That would be considered the best thing. And women would be, well, yeah, you know, what else am I going to do? This is our natural imperative. All this fempowerment and all this equality is nonsense because women really, honest and truly, their ultimate dream is to be taken care of by a good man and be a baby factory. So, okay, fine. But what they've done is with this rigging of the game, which they've wanted to do, they've wanted to turn women into rock'em sock'em power men who act like men, talk like men, are brash and crash like men, belch when guzzling beer like men, yell and scream at bars like men, brag about how tough they think they are like men, make the money that men make, and at the same time be desirable to men. They want men to commit to them, but none of them are willing to confront the family court system and the divorce court system that makes things impossible for any man with a fucking brain in his head. Like, there should be a support group for men, like an intervention before you get married. Go listen to a guy who got his shirt taken and his life destroyed by divorce. Go watch, right when you're done listening to me, go on YouTube and look up the Joe Kennick, Kenick, and that nightmare. It's all caught on video for your horror. As he's saying that his ex-wife cheated on him, committed adultery. She goes, you don't do no more for me. I want a divorce. Completely instigated by her. The judge gavels down that his entire house was taken away at a $460,000 value. He had this house custom built, which he owned prior to his marriage to her and prior to the kids. So it's his unless there are kids involved. So the judge orders that away and orders him to pay child support. He says, well, the value of the house, which was mine, you took away. That equals the total value, more exceeds the total value of the child support. So aren't we done? Judge goes, no, you also owe child support and you're ordered to pay it. This poor guy says, I don't have it. The balance in my bank account is negative $22. Judge goes, gavel down, you're off to jail. sends the guy to jail for not being able to pay his blood money. Something has got to be done about this domination of women by means of this feminine primary social order, where women can do this very easily. They can reconcile contradictory ideas in their own heads, and they don't want to give it up. They like the idea of being able to spilk. There's some Yiddish coming out of me. Spilk a guy for all he's worth should the divorce happen, and they don't want to give that up. But at the same time, they're really upset that where have all the good men gone? Nobody wants to marry me. And you're pushing 36 and you got baby rabies and your biological clock is ticking. Meanwhile, we have all this shaming language against men being single, men going their own way. Men going their own way is this natural consequence to all of this misandrous garbage going on. And how can you blame us? How can you blame us for going our own way when, as a man, your needs don't count for anything? You're not entitled to have any expectation of respect or loyalty, or even to be treated nicely. As my primary thing is not the typical concerns by the MRAs and the MGTOW community about divorce and all that stuff. That stuff's all true, but that's easy enough to avoid. You say, well, honey, I love you, but we ain't getting married, and just find someone willing to deal with it if you can. But my main concern has been the interpersonal dynamics and the attitude that is going on, where it's in the air you breathe. And the women that I've dated I'm talking in the last 15 years, don't feel the need to have to care about anyone, your opinions, your beliefs. Dare I sound like a pussy by saying your feelings? But hey, guys, it's true. We do. We have feelings, we have emotions. And if you've got a woman who's determined to talk down to you, tear you down, tell you how to dress, tell you how to act, start nitpicking you, nagging you, controlling you, shit testing you, telling you what you can and can't have, making sure that you don't have any friendships outside of her, being jealous of any interest you have outside of her, that you would want to maybe discuss that a little bit by drawing a boundary, by saying, hey, that really makes me feel lousy when you do that. Like, oh, well, he's a pussy for having feelings. Or, your feelings? Who the fuck cares about your feelings? It's all about me. And that, with me, has really been the determining factor as to why I'm really not trying anymore for this relationship stuff, because that's how women approach relationships. They approach it not in this way where I would hope, like, we all have our own self-interest, right? But out of self-interest, we would want to have some equity in the relationship out of self-interest entirely. So, like, yeah, I want a woman who looks good, but also treats me well. And for us to have a good relationship, because that serves my best interest, we can be able to communicate freely and have a good conversation about this if any issue comes up. But when women today look at relationship like, well, what are you going to do for me? Are you going to be perfect? Are you going to act perfect? Are you going to ever say the wrong thing? And are you ever going to step out of a way that this little swim lane that I've defined for how my perfect man needs to act? And women are, this is the thing. This is how it's caused this distortion. There was this book called, I believe it was called The End to Overeating. And the author of this book discusses the nature of hyper palatable food. So basically what he says is, he said that as human beings, we're geared to get as much fat, sugar, and salt as possible. It's like crack to us. Fat, sugar, salt, fat, sugar, salt. And so manufacturers of addictive foods make sure to put lots of that stuff in it. It's not just palatable, it's hyper palatable. And that's why you have to eat the whole bag of potato chips, because it has nothing to do with hunger. You just can't stop. Because we're wired for the fat, the sugar, and the salt, and they put hyper amounts into it, and we hyper eat. The author brings up this example of hypersexuality in male butterflies. So the author cites this study, and he says basically that male butterflies try to mate with the female butterflies that beat their wings the fastest, because to them, that's a sign of health and fertility. Like he's going to have strong, healthy offspring if the female that he impregnates is strong, healthy, and is a good flyer, right? This female butterfly beats her wings the fastest. So you could have a study, and the study was done, where you have an enclosure, you have a male butterfly, and you have female butterflies. And the male butterflies go straight for those females that are moving the fastest and beating their wings the fastest. But then what you can do is, and what the experimenters did, is they projected on the wall of the enclosure a video of a female butterfly, and the video has been sped up to where the female butterfly is beating her wings 100 times faster than any butterfly in nature could possibly beat her wings. So does the male butterfly go, oh, well, that's fake? No. He tries to mate with the image on the wall. The male butterfly flies to the image projected on the wall and tries to basically mate with this fake image, the static image. So what that means is that we have our own biological drives, but those drives can be hyperstimulated. They can be overrepresented, and they can be hyperstimulated. They can be hacked. They can be hijacked. With pornography, with males, your brain on porn proves that, right? So we as men, we're geared toward sexual variety, to seek out a variety of partners. We get the dopamine hit, and that's good for us to do it, but you could hyperstimulate that to the point where it actually damages you, to the point where you can't be stimulated by anything normal. Seems boring to you. You're burned out. You're habituated on your own neurotransmitters, right? And that causes damage. Like this book was saying that after pornography, because you can completely hyperstimulate on porn, you can edge, right? Which means you can get yourself closer and closer to orgasm and just completely overload your sensory organs with, multiple tabs open at once and fast forwarding and seeking out fetishes and weird stuff and all these things. And there are men who can't get an erection when it's time to have their first sex experiences. It's not like my day when I was a teenager and it was some dirty magazine that I had found. Nothing like that. So that would be the downfall on the male side. So what's the downfall on the female side? Well, if females are naturally hypergamous, meaning that, well, they kind of sit around and they try to wait they'll hold off on the sex. They'll shut that down, and they're designed that way. From an evolutionary perspective, from a biological perspective, they're supposed to wait until they feel the landscape of available males for who they think has, potentially either the alpha traits of strength or the beta traits of providership, or preferably a little bit of both. That's why women, they fuck the asshole and then they try to betafy him, try to turn him into a provider and fail. And then she's a single mom and she looks for a beta guy. But either way, what happens when you put in a woman's hand a magical device that lets her pick from, or think she's picking from, thousands and thousands of potential mates? Well, she will have optimized her hypergamy to the point where she may actually check out of the long-term relationship department. It may become an impossibility for her to do that. I mean, it would be like, what if my male imperatives were met perfectly? What if a magical technology were invented where you had absolutely perfect lifelike androids of women? Like, not, just like sex dolls, but they're kind of bad and they don't kiss like women, they don't smell like women, they're not women. But what if you just couldn't tell the difference? Maybe that day will come. And I have a harem of 20 beautiful girls aged 20 to 24, and they're on a constant rotation. What if I could bang a different one every day? What if you, forget the sex robot part, what if you could bang a fresh 23-year-old every day of the week? Would you ever settle down for a life of monogamy with any one woman? No. You say, hell no, because our male sexual imperatives would be so optimized that would just feel stupid. Why would I do that? So on the female side, is that what they're experiencing? Women are not just nitpicky, they're hyper nitpicky. I am noticing this. I heard through a friend that one girl dumped a guy because he took a nap. This is how she relayed the story. He said he was tired. He said, I have to take a nap. She said, oh, no, my man does not take naps. Ew. Ew. Or they go looking for things. Yeah, I noticed, you didn't load the dishwasher right. I noticed, this little thing. And so they go on this quest to try to change you, which only results in unhappiness on both sides. And so here's what we have, folks. Here's what we have in this wonderful digital realm. Men and women both rotting away in soulless, meaningless office jobs, and they can't even relate to each other. Men living alone in silos and women living alone in silos. Single-headed households where only one person is living there are at an all-time high. Marriages not happening. Families not happening. Couples not staying together. Men not having sex. Where now I'm seeing that being sexually active for males is becoming a luxury item. It's becoming like something for the upper echelons of men, because as they pointed out on Red Man Group, no, it's not 1-to-1. You see, you equalists, you don't get it. You think, well, if male sexuality is at an all-time low, then that means female sexuality must be at an all-time low, because you got relatively equal populations of men and women. Yeah, but what are you forgetting? It's the top 20% of SMV guys that all the women are throwing themselves at. Those guys are having lots of sex. So much for this idea of the internet era bringing about a new age of ultimate leftist equalism. No, actually what it has done, especially in the sexual marketplace, has created an even greater narrowing of the Pareto principle, which is what's to be expected, right? So you have the situation where large percentages of men are just checking out, because you notice it, you see it in all the diagnosis that women give for it, like, oh, you're just not trying it hard enough, don't give up, oh no, approach us. All nonsense, because you see it, and I know firsthand that you go, what the hell, man? Like, I'm a good guy, 6-figure earner and all this. They could give a shit less. Well, why? Why could they give a shit less? Well, because they've been conditioned that they're independent and they're awesome little rock stars all on their own. So that's the feminazi part. The feminazi part is, well, yeah, but I'm not particularly motivated in that direction anyway, because I'm too high on my own narcissism and my own quote-unquote independence to really want those things. And then when she approaches the wall, because they've basically thrown the traditional lifestyle out the window where women were more geared towards settling down at a younger age, she'll realize it at 36, 38, or 40. But even at that point in time, her own narcissism and her hypergamous instincts and attention whoring online will convince her that she's hot shit even though she's over the wall. So her attitude makes her wholly undateable. And the sad truth of that is, you look at it and you go, is dating really, like, is a man having regular sexual contact becoming like a Lamborghini, becoming a rare, handmade enjoyment for a very exclusive audience? Because at no time in our history was this ever a big deal. Was this ever really a thing? And I'm going back even just one generation or barely that. I mean, just mine. You had high school dances. A guy could always get a date. The weekend was nothing if not date night. And I can't help but get emotional when, you look at the 80's Karate Kid, the real one, not just the nostalgia piece. And you look at what happens in that film, right? So Daniel LaRusso and his little girlfriend, they go to golf and stuff, and you got the little 80's music montage. It's like, yeah, and these are supposed to be high school kids. That's what you're supposed to do. And in that spirit of, kind of exploration and fear, teenagers have their first kisses and their, whatever experimentation they're going under. But, it was supposed to be human contact, when now my little talk I did on the Sam Vaknin interview, young people, teenagers, conduct 70% of their human interactions through these apps. That is the way that they interact. Or I'm sorry, it was a same thing, I guess, 70% reduction in interpersonal contact among young people. So for them, that really is living in the Matrix. That's the Matrix. Sam Vaknin uses that exact analogy. It is living in the Matrix because that is reality to them. That's what makes for a real relationship to them, or a real friend to them. They're not interacting face to face anymore. And we want to be protected. We want to be protected. This is the other component to this female rudeness and brashness. Why are they so cutting with their insults and their comments, and women that don't even know you? She doesn't even know me, and she's going to make some lame comment or share her opinion like I'm supposed to be so invested in her fucking opinion when I don't even know her. Yet there's this expectation that her opinion. And all women are like this today. All of them. It's not one or two. Don't come at me and say, oh, what girls are you hanging out with? It's all of them. You all fucking act this way today. Why? Where's the humility, ladies? Where's the politeness? Where's the civility? And I realized in horror what it is. That the Matrix, the social media posts where everybody vomits their fucking worthless opinions all over the place, and you get all this narcissistic feedback, that has become the standard by which people interact in the real world. So the next time a woman blah, 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 with some little quip or some lame opinion about how you look or runs her mouth at you, it's because to her, unbeknownst perhaps to her, that is no different than some diarrhea mouth Facebook post or a tweet. That's what it is. Why not? Why should I care? Why should I think? Other people aren't real. Other people don't have feelings. I don't have to censor myself. I don't have to think about the impact that that's going to have. There's no difference. You see? That has affected sociologies. That has affected our interactions on a sociological basis, where that has become the standard by which we conduct ourselves out in the world. That's the gold standard. So if her digital life is just diarrhea mouth and narcissism and getting attention, why would she not parlay that into her interpersonal relationships with other human beings? You're just another fly on her wall, right? Well, she's got tons of strangers looking at her shit and giving her attention. So why wouldn't she do it? You know? Don't think for a second that bars and clubs are going to survive in this environment, because you might make the same mistake that I did, thinking that the old world is still alive and that you carry more value and more weight, like I believe I do as a real person, but women don't perceive it that way. So the bars and the clubs may look the same, but they're not the same. They're there for women exclusively to pump their SMV, get free drinks, and then go home. Maybe they'll go home with a hot guy. But why is the flaking behavior, which is increasingly easy with mobile devices, or the ghosting behavior, so commonplace? It's because you've been put in the same pocket. You get a girl's number, you're just another Bing on her phone next to her Instagram or Snapchat or Tinder. The internet era has hyperstimulated those parts of each gender's sexual imperative and made our real world experience dull, undesirable, feel dangerous by comparison, much to our peril, much to our demise as a species. So, there are some MGTOW individuals that I've listened to on YouTube. And one I listened to, I really disagreed with. He said, he said, MGTOW should not just be a reaction to how shitty things are. I mean, if that weren't the case, you wouldn't have any MGTOWs. There would be no reason. There'd be no point to it because males' interaction with females are intended to be pleasurable. They're the best pleasure possible. Would be date night, having a girlfriend. It was seen as a net positive. Being around women, dating women, having romance, doing fun things. All the way back to when you're in high school. The Daniel LaRusso golf and stuff date. I remember that golf and stuff. I grew up in that area. So that's real golf and stuff. I think it's still there. Down in Tarzana or something, I think. And why would you want to miss out on the sweetest thing that life has to offer? And you fast forward to today, and men are going, it's not worth it. Why would men go, it's not worth it? It fails. All these ideas about it potentially being pleasurable are great, but that's not how it's working out in my experience. I feel like giving up. I feel like going my own way. I feel like looking out for myself. And even welcoming some loneliness if that's what it takes. So you really have to ask yourself, why is it failing the cost-benefit analysis? It's because our interactions with women are becoming horrendously unpleasant. That's the only thing. You see these ladies, fucking this one on Twitter, back when I had a Twitter, it's like, something bad must have happened to you. It's like, not just me. When it's every woman you interact with on a potentially romantic basis or trying to date or flirt with, or you do, God forbid, get a girlfriend and she turns into a monster, just a total self-absorbed, hypercritical, nagging, shaming, demeaning piece of shit that's all about herself. The worst quality of any narcissist you could ever meet. And she's got an Instagram full of orbiters to replace you. And she's going to complain if you don't want to marry her. You really have to stop and think about this. Something that for men has become one of the sweetest things to something that is just not worth it. That could not have happened unless it has become grotesquely unpleasant for the overwhelming majority of men to engage in. So when men and women become these isolated little digitally addicted stooges in their own little isolated, lonely universes, who do we turn to? We turn to the government. We turn to the matrix, and we turn to the state. And the relationship between the matrix and the state is incestuous, right? The social media censorship of Alex Jones and conservative voices and how they all did it in this coordinated fashion on the same day. Mark Zuckerberg testifies in front of Congress with his backhanded apology. I am so sorry I let you down by not censoring people. It's my fault that Donald Trump got elected. Now they're going to be the fact checkers and the even more censorship of conservatives. Who knows? Censorship of MGTOW that's already happened. You can't criticize women. We can't have that. The promise of the internet as opening up this wonderful world of freedom is a lie. It's gone because with that decadence comes the demand to be protected, to be insulated. You want all of your interactions to be pre-screened, pre-scrubbed, especially the ladies, pre-vetted. Ladies aren't willing to date you. They're not going to even meet you unless they're going to go through this vetting, height verification, age verification, send me more photos. I don't know. We'll see. And that's what's become of just a casual coffee date, just to try to get a coffee date out of them. But also, you want to be insulated from being insulted, from having your feelings hurt, from seeing anything that might offend you. This is the generation that's coming up that is welcoming this, that is currently leading to the destruction of the greatest civilization that the planet has ever seen. It's not a theory, guys. It's a fact. It is happening right now. The social justice generation is coming of age, and they're putting people into office that will completely eradicate the United States of America as we know it. This Ocasio-Cortez dint, this fucking goddamn dint, this idiot, fucking dumb cunt bitch idiot, finds her way into Congress. It's a matter of time. And their model would be like Canada, Canadian-style censorship, fines for misogynistic talk. Like they're doing in Europe, you'll have the police calling you, asking you about your social media posts. absolutely horrific. It's 1984 on steroids with this weird leftist gynocentric social justice bent that is just plain icky. It's just disgusting. And the natural order will be restored when civilization collapses. There's no way to fix this by means of the current system. I'm trying to raise awareness as everybody is, but we can't turn it around once the ship has sailed. There are a lot of signs. It's going to be very painful. I'm not going to do anything to try to bring it about, nor am I advocating it, because you can't anyway. You just have to sit back and watch the show. But the fiat currencies of the world that are pending collapse, the zero population growth that's going to happen, influx of refugees, so many things that can bring about the collapse of our civilization, and that is underway. It happens on the ideological level first. That's how you get these ideas like no borders, no nations, the beta O'Rourke's of the world, and the Ocasio-Cortezes of the world, the people that think that it's racist to have borders. They want to turn the United States into another Sweden, France, Germany, England. Bus in the migrants. It'll destroy our civilization. And they'll be happy to try to break the backs of the taxpayer in order to do it. And there's going to be those Atlas shrugged moments and pockets of resistance and all those things. And that'll be it. But when that happens, the natural roles, the organic natural roles for men and women will fall back into place. I'm not saying it's going to be very painful. It's going to be very difficult. Those periods are very unpleasant. But anything short of that, I don't really see. Like, how is this sustainable? And I consider myself a MGTOW right now, at least in this phase of my life, just as a response to this. The only way I can really be happy right now. But at least in this stage of my life. But you can't look at this inability for men and women to get along, which is what the quote-unquote progressive progress has brought us, as anything that's sustainable. How can you celebrate that and congratulate that? We're people. We're supposed to come together. Men and women are supposed to come together. And we're being driven farther and farther apart. Farther and farther and farther apart. You have 300 friends on Facebook. You don't know the names of your next door neighbors. Your grandparents' generation, they wouldn't believe that. They wouldn't know what to think of that. Like, of course, you knew who everyone on your block was, Mr. This, Mr. That. Yeah, you knew a little bit of their business, but if shit were to hit the fan, you'd go to your neighbors. That's a community. That's a social network, a real social network. Your neighbors. We don't know the names of our neighbors, but we know the names of these Congress people, these idiot celebrities, even the president. Like, we know way too much about the president, not enough about the real people in our lives. And we can't date, and everyone is completely isolated in this digital bubble. And the dam's going to burst. Something is going to happen, I think, that is really going to make people swear off of these technologies or swear off of these lifestyles. And I hope and pray that day comes, that does happen. Okay? I hope I didn't depress you too much. Have a wonderful day. Thank you.